Hi everyone, welcome to Expansion Scapes, my channel. I'm Olga. I'm a shamanic healing practitioner, an artist, a writer, and I welcome you to join me on my journey on rediscovering what emotions are and rediscovering and relearning how to actually feel and experience emotions at the time that they come naturally and in a healthy way, so that we don't need to suppress emotions or ignore them or deny them or, not feel them because we're afraid of them, afraid of even realizing we have certain emotions, feeling guilty for having certain emotions, judging certain emotions, being ashamed of having certain emotions. So all these things, they block us from having emotions. And then later on, at least on my healing journey, a lot of the healing that I do has to do with going back to some point where I or my client has suppressed an emotion and it has become like a big thing. And then we're going to have to eventually figure that out, bring that up, and actually bring it to the surface again for the purpose of healing it and letting it go. So if eventually we're going to have to, look back at our emotions and bring them forth and realize them, and many times, to actually feel them, to recognize them, to heal things relevant to them, and to let them go. If we're going to have to do that anyway with every emotion that we suppress, so why don't we actually learn to decrease the amount of future needed healing, rediscover, relearn how to actually feel our emotions where we don't need to suppress them. We don't need to put them away somewhere in a box where they will get worse and worse and like rotten and worse and more to the point of needing healing again. So my intention is to rediscover what emotions are, what their purpose is in our system, how to feel them, how to experience them in a natural and healthy way in order to be more authentic, more ourselves, and feel more alive. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I found out what emotions are, or how I learned what emotions are from one of my out-of-body experiences, out-of-body journeys, where I came across a being who kind of educated me on what emotions are. So this was an out-of-body experience, a journey. It was, really, really long. There were many, many things where I traveled to different places and I saw different beings and I did different things. And this is just one encounter with one being, which I guess I can talk about this even small encounter for a really long time because the experience was really rich. So in that out-of-body experience or journey, I came across a being which was a dragon, and he was a Chinese-looking dragon. And I was very surprised to see that the detail of the dragon is just so exactly similar to the traditional Chinese artworks, how they depict dragons. So he was very serpentine, very long, and he had all these beautiful parts of him. Like he had arms and legs. I'm sure you don't call that arms and legs for a dragon, but okay, he had 4 limbs and he had different kinds of growths on his skin, and he had beautiful kind of whiskers, or how do you call that part of his body? And basically he was just glowing, and he was actually transparent to me. And as we were interacting, he looked kind of like this tree here that I drew earlier. And this is often how I see beings in the non-physical. So when I have my out-of-body experiences, journeys, or visions, when I communicate with, for example, animal spirits or plant spirits, or any kind of being, actually, very often I would see them like this tree over here. And that's why I painted this tree like that. So I hope you can see this tree on this video, but basically it has this like multiple small lines, and they all have different colors, and they're really, really bright. And this tree is very simple compared to the actual, like how I see those beings, because in the actual visions that I have, it's like very, very complicated. So this dragon was transparent. I just saw like a slight outline of his body, but basically inside I saw many, many kind of small rivers and streams, almost like, they looked a bit like blood veins, but they were not. And they would be like a river. Like sometimes there would be a lot of them with a lot of colors, and sometimes they would like branch out into smaller streams, and then they would reconnect and connect again. And yeah, it was like a very intricate system, and it was a very complicated system of these colors just going almost like electrical impulses, appearing, disappearing, and not really appearing, disappearing, but more like being born and then naturally, not dying. I don't want to say dying, but being born and experienced and then just depleted. And I realized that these were emotions. These were the dragon's emotions, and they just ran throughout the whole of his body, and they created his body, basically. And each of these emotions, they carried a lot of information with it. It's almost impossible to describe the complexity of the whole thing. But getting back to this video's intention on emotions, what are emotions, and how to feel them in a natural, healthy way, I would say that by looking at this dragon, I learned what are emotions and how to actually feel them in a healthy way. So the way we interacted with this dragon was without words. And the whole interaction only needed the observation of these bright, colorful lights inside of his body. And these were his emotions. And each little color, like over here you see like there are small lines, there are pink lines, there are green lines, there are purple lines, there are orange lines, there are yellow lines, and they're all quite short, and they're kind of in a shape like, small to becoming bigger and then becoming smaller again. It's like a natural progression of how we feel emotions. And what I learned from observing that dragon was that emotions have a natural beginning, kind of like a story or a song, a beginning, middle, and an end. And there is a natural progression and experience of emotions. And I think a lot of times we don't want to experience some kind of emotions which we are afraid of, for example, pain. Because we may be afraid that if I feel that pain, I might just kind of like whoop and feel pain for a really long time, or feel pain forever. And then we just end up, suppressing that pain and not feeling it. But I think what we have forgotten is that emotions have a natural beginning. And if you allow them to be felt, they become bigger and bigger. It's like a flower, it's coming from a seed. It's growing bigger, and it's blooming. And then naturally it starts to wilt. And then, it goes back to earth. So I would say that I learned from this dragon that emotions have a natural beginning, a climax point, like a story, and then going down, 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 and just naturally, being finished because their purpose has been served. So when I learned that, I felt like even the scariest emotion, which we don't want to feel, we can actually feel it and not have to be afraid of getting stuck in that emotion, or, even like being almost destroyed by this emotion or something. Because if we allow ourselves to completely feel that emotion, there will be a natural end to that emotion. And the purpose of feeling that emotion will have been met. So we can actually move on to the next stage of whatever it is that we're experiencing. And going back to this tree with all these little lines, so the way I see them, whether it's a plant spirit or this dragon or any animal spirit, any being really, human spirit, whatever, I often see them as these very, very bright neon lights, but they're not even neon colored lights. They have I see them as much more colorful than the colors I have seen here in the physical. And they're constantly almost like pulsating, and they're just always kind of running up like a river. So for example, for this tree, these lights would be, for example, they have rivers and sub-rivers and streams and substreams, and then sometimes they go into they separate, and sometimes they come together. And every single thing has a meaning, and it has a reason why it happened, and it's how the being experiences themselves, and it's also how they express themselves to others. So, for example, here, let's say we follow a bunch of these colors, and some of them come and they become a branch. So these emotions, it's really hard to explain in words, and I'm not attempting to describe all the details, but I'm hoping that it can be felt. So some of these colors would go and it would create a part of someone's body. So in this case, it's a branch. And it's hard to explain, but these emotions create the branch. And that's how they express themselves. And they're like, oh, look, we're having these emotions. This is our reaction to the world, to the universe, to something that we're experiencing. So in a way, these emotions are like, this is how this being reacts to the outside world stimulus, or to another being, talking to them, interacting to them. And they're like, look, this is my reaction. This is my almost like creation, this is how I feel when I look at you like this. Or this is how I feel when I look at the world, or this is how I feel when I am experiencing something. And then it's like, this is who I am, this is me, this is me. And in this emotional strain of something, of those little, all these little lights, which each of them is an emotion. In this way, it's like it creates itself. Like the being constantly creates itself with its own emotions. And by being, I mean anybody. I mean me, I mean animals, plants, earth, anything, wall, So in this case, the emotions, they create this branch, and they're like, they are having an emotional reaction to something, and at the same time, that's how they create, how the tree creates itself, how the branch creates itself. So from this experience, I learned that each of these small lights is one emotion. And that emotion has a beginning, middle, and an end. And emotions flow like these multiple small lines, and they glow up and then they dim down, and they glow, and then there's another emotion. Each emotion is different. So when I was looking at the dragon, and the dragon was having reactions, emotional reactions to not only me, but the other stuff that was going on where we were. And it knew that I saw the dragon completely. So it was transparent, and I saw all the inner emotions, like this tree, but much more intricate. And I knew that at that time, when the dragon looked at me, the dragon also saw me in this transparent way with all my emotions visible to him. And in this way, we could completely know each other. And the beautiful thing was that when the dragon looked at me, and I looked at the dragon, and the dragon knew that I was fascinated with studying his emotions. I was just staring at him, and I was just so fascinated and so taken aback. I was just staring at all these little lines. And if I would put my focus on each of this line, I would know exactly what this emotion was and what it was reacting to. And in this knowledge, I could know much more about the nature of the dragon, because only the dragon would have that emotion. I wouldn't have that emotion because I'm not the dragon, and I'm not that particular dragon. And in this observation, I just felt like I knew the dragon, and it just felt like I just was overcome with a lot of love for the dragon. And I could actually tell which emotions of the dragon were as a result of my interaction with him, and which emotions came from his reaction to something else where we were, the environment, and there were other beings as well. And it was amazing to see how those lines of lights / emotions, they would sometimes come out and create a body part of his, and I would observe how he created himself continuously. It's like we think that, oh, here's me, I have been already created one way or another, and that's me. But that's not really how it happens. From that experience, I learned that we are constantly creating ourselves. And for example, he would constantly create his whisker. And this whisker would be like, oh, look, this is how I react to the world, and also this is how I express myself, and this is me, the whisker. And the whisker had its own personality and its own life and its own existence, and the whisker was creating itself constantly, continuously, pulsating. Every time there would be a pulsating action, the whole being, the whole dragon felt like he was recreating himself. And I feel that actually it's the same for all beings. So in a way, we are constantly renewing ourselves. And inside the dragon, as I said before, there are many rivers and sub-rivers. And the rivers had to do with similar kinds of emotions, but not only... Actually, it's really hard to explain why some of them would be grouped. It's not like I could give one word and say, oh, they're grouped because of this. But there were many reasons, complicated reasons, why some of the emotions would be grouped in one river, and then why sometimes they would go out. And that really correlated with his internal organ system. But the organ system really explained his being, who he is. And naturally, he creates his organs because that's who I am, And it was a really beautiful experience where I realized that every single emotion matters. Every single emotion matters. Even though one emotion just exists for a while and it wilts and dies away, I don't like to say the word die. It's really not the true word here, but blooms and wilts. Okay, I'll say blooms and wilts. Even though they're so small, like look at these lines, they're so small, it's easy to think, well, one of them is not important. But it's not true. It's like the whole system is just important as this little part of the system. And in another way that you can look at these emotions is by assigning or even tuning into and listening to a particular sound that each of these lines, emotions, create. So this could also be seen as this dragon or this tree or me or any being in the world creates a kind of symphony with their emotions. So if we're going to look at each of these lines as having a note, and in this tree, I didn't draw like rivers and sub-rivers and streams and sub-streams and then something reuniting with each other and something separating, because it's really difficult. So this is a simplified version of that. But those rivers and sub-rivers and sub-streams really relate to a symphony, and if you know this word, an arrangement of the symphony. So some of that would be a melody, and some of that would be a chord, and some of that would be a chorus. So let's say when the emotions come together in a big river, that feels like, 100 violins playing in the background in an orchestra. And then some other part of emotions would be like drums. And the small streams would be like, I don't know, like little flutes. And the whole being, when you hear the whole being, you hear a symphony of that being. And in that case, my curiosity I was curious to ask, well, what happens when we block or suppress one of these emotions? And I got a visual answer where one of these lines, just goes like blocked, and just and where it gets blocked, as I earlier told you that the emotion has this shape, okay. I have observed, at least for that example, that it gets blocked somewhere in the beginning. Oh, I just realized that if you guys ever studied statistics, the shape really represents the normal distribution curve, like, okay, that, I hope that makes sense to someone. So it feels to me that the emotions are normally blocked somewhere in the beginning. And it's when we actually register that we start to have that emotion so that we can react. For example, we have a block or a false belief or some kind of belief that, oh no, I can't experience this emotion. For example, because my mom taught me that, girls shouldn't be angry. Real ladies don't get angry, or real ladies don't express their anger and don't raise their voice and don't disagree or something. Or maybe if you were a man growing up, you could have heard something like, real men don't cry or something, boys don't cry. So if we have these beliefs to which we agree, let's say from our parents, or somebody told us that we can't experience certain emotions at school, by teachers or by friends, by colleagues, whatever. Maybe we heard it on TV. And let's say I feel anger, and because of the structure of my beliefs, I feel ashamed. Let's say that I feel anger. And then also I feel scared to feel that anger because I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm afraid, I'm afraid of 1 million things of if I actually express that anger, if I actually feel it. And so let's say I'm ashamed of my anger and I'm afraid of it. So just as my system registers that, oh, I'm starting to feel anger, my system goes and shuts it down, like blocks it, stops it. It's like, whoop, no, not going to feel this. And visually, in that system of colorful, rivers, I saw it as a kind of inflammation. So this emotion that was supposed to bloom and wilt in a natural order of things. So the anger, I just want to say it again, the anger will not necessarily last forever, which I feel like is one of the assumptions we have about these negative or something we perceive as negative emotions. At least I know, I'm afraid that if I give into this, for some reason I have a feeling like, I'll just get into that emotion forever and it'll just be the only emotion I'll ever feel. But it's not like that. It has a blooming period and a wilting period. So in that system of emotions, almost like blood flowing through the veins, I saw that when we block an emotion, for example, I'm blocking my anger, and it goes boop, but the emotion wants to be felt. Like maybe you plant a seed somewhere and it gets covered by concrete, but eventually, it's just more and more power, and it will come out later anyway, but perhaps it will come out in an unhealthy way. Of some sorts, in a more painful way than it had to be. In any case, I saw it that it was just like pushing and pushing. It was throbbing and throbbing. And it still existed. It's not like it doesn't exist. A part of it did exist, but it was inflamed. And inflammation to me, at least in the physical, we feel it as perhaps fever, or we feel it as pain. And it doesn't go away. It's just like, it's just trying to go, but it won't because we are suppressing it. So all the other emotions are affected by it. Like I said, it looks like, the emotional flow looks like veins and the blood going through veins. This block also feels to me very similar to blood clots that we have in our veins, and that, if they move and you get stuck in the heart, it can be lethal. So it also like symbolically translates, first it translates into possible inflammation and, pain, and also symbolically it can manifest as blood clots or some other similar stuff. And the interesting thing is that all other emotions get affected. So because this emotion didn't go through its natural journey, all the other emotions, their journeys are changed because of this emotion that didn't get to be realized at this time, didn't get to be expressed at this time. So all the other emotions are going to flow in a slightly different way. And if you're going to look at it as a symphony, and if you're listening to that being itself, it's like singing the song of itself. And it's like, if the being is not suppressing its emotions, all of the emotions flow freely, and it's like all the notes of the symphony are matching with each other, like the chorus and the violins and the melody and the voice singing or whatever, the bells ringing, whatever it is, all of them are in a kind of harmony, and it sounds really like pure and beautiful. But let's say there's an emotion that is in that state of stuckness, and imagine that you're listening to a symphony, but one of the violins has gone out of tune and it's still playing the same notes, but they're really out of tune. So your experience of listening to that whole symphony would be changed. Even though everything else works perfectly fine, you would hear that one of the notes is out of tune, and that would change the whole symphony. That would be like, ooh, that violin's really, not in tune with the whole thing. So that's how important one emotion is relevant to the whole being. So even if we just block that one emotion, the whole symphony of our being, now we are playing like a false tune, because there's one false note. So it's like oh, the whole symphony sounds really weird and false. And to me, it also feels like we're being inauthentic. Like if all the emotions are going fine and we didn't block them, then the symphony that we're playing as a being is really like our song. You know, this is our song. This is a song of who I am. This is a song of me. But if, let's say, one of the emotions is blocked, and that symbolizes like a false note, the whole symphony sounds wrong, sounds false. And in a way, it's like, oh, I am singing a song that is kind of similar to what I really am, to my authentic self, but it sounds false. So I am being kind of like not my authentic self because I have blocked myself in some way, which is, you know, in this way we're looking at blocking our emotions. So I have blocked myself in some way, and therefore I am singing a symphony of myself, which is a false symphony. And if we're going to look at, you know, if we see that one emotion can have one blocked emotion can have such a huge impact on the whole being. Just imagine me or you or any being in the world in a system of all beings, and even one being singing a false note means that the whole system sounds like, you know, not its true self or something like that. But that is going like way beyond the scope of this video. I hope that in this video I have expressed and shared with you my discovery of what emotions are and their nature, and how important it is to experience them and not hide them or block them. Because eventually, if we do block them, we're gonna have to go back and to rediscover that emotion, to let it out anyway. So why don't we just learn how to experience our emotions in a natural, healthy way with no fear, shame, blame, guilt, and all that stuff. So that is why in my series of videos on emotions, I am focusing on each emotion at a time and sharing with you actually my journey of how I discovered that particular emotion, and I discover all the reasons why I block them within myself, and how I learned to experience them in a healthy, natural way. And I want to mention once again, which the thing that I mention in every video is that I am sharing my journey. So some stuff would resonate with some people and some stuff wouldn't. But my intention for these videos, my intention for sharing my journey in discovering emotions, is to kind of motivate and inspire everyone else's journeys into themselves, into their emotions, and figuring out for themselves, rediscovering themselves, every one of their emotions, and how they can more freely experience and live out their emotions. And, you know, truly live with a capital letter L, you know, live. And experience life to the fullest, instead of, you know, blocking, and really censoring ourselves in this way. Please comment to this video and let me know what you guys think about this story, my experience with the dragon and with the emotions. I'd really love to know that. And if you'd like to book a shamanic healing session with me, you can write me at expansionscapes@gmail.com and book one. Also, you can check out my book, which is called Tales of the Spirit and the Divine, which is based on my out-of-body experiences, spiritual visions, and journeys, and all this kind of stuff in the non-physical, where I create short stories and poems of the spirit and the divine, which have an intention of healing, you know, and bringing up some kind of authentic feeling, like bringing us back to our own authentic self, to being true to ourselves. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video. I appreciate you. I appreciate your curiosity. Thank you, and I hope to see you again in my other videos. Bye.